Hanoch and I met, I don't know, I'm old, it doesn't matter, years ago. It all seems like yesterday. And honestly, as most of you could, probably say, the first Jewish person I ever met, that I knew, was, and his warmth and his openness to discuss things and answer questions, no matter how, silly or, rudimentary or out of place they might have been, was astounding to me, because in my search for truth, I had run into a lot of rabbinic teaching and different things that basically said, "Oh, you dirty Gentiles, like stay away from us, ick," And I said this last night. I've realized that there are many, and maybe even a growing number of quote-unquote Torah-minded congregations that will not have a Jew in their fellowship. And that is both astounding and saddening and infuriating to me. The prophet says that there'll come a day when 10 from the nations will grab hold of the tzitzit of Yehudi, of the Jew, and say, "Let us go with you, for we've heard that God is with you." We've talked about this on Wednesday nights in our Wednesday night remnant study, so if you're not involved in that, go to our Facebook page, you can find out more information about it. But when many of us came into Torah, we were really looking for an identity. Who are we? We're not Christians, or we didn't think we were. We are. And that's okay. It's a good thing. But through our hurt and through all the stuff, we were looking for another thing. And so many of us began to identify, and again, I know that's a politically charged word, but in the sincerest of terms, we began to identify as Israel. And that's a beautiful thing. Even our Christian scriptures tell us that we are grafted into the Commonwealth of Israel. And yet there seems to be a struggle there because, but I didn't grow up as Israel. I don't, their customs are not my customs. Their songs are not my songs. I don't understand their scriptures in a lot of cases. And so there tends for some people to be a rub there where you almost feel like you're playing a part. And what we're scared of is we're scared of just being the nations. We're scared of wearing the nations as an identity. Which, you know what? The nations are a massive part of prophecy as well. Of the fulfillment. And so, that's the passage that we referenced. It says that 10 from the nations will grab the tzitzit of the Jew. So if you identify as Israel, that's wonderful, it's beautiful. If you think of yourself as a part of the nations, either way, we are the fulfillment of prophecy today in DeRidder, Louisiana, in Rose Pine, Louisiana, because we have come to hear from a Jew. And that is a beautiful and marvelous thing. So, without setting him up too much more and clarifying and giving you a description and stuff of what he's going to talk about, I do want you to know this. We have been pushing the boundaries in the last few weeks about the scripture and asking hard questions, and some of you were probably a little perturbed last week at some of the stuff we talked about. That's okay. You got to remember, everything that I'm teaching you, it offended me at one point, and I got over it and worked through it, and I want to help you do that. And so Hanoch is going to say some things and discuss some topics that you may have the gut reaction to be offended. And what I want to ask you to do is keep an open mind and don't let offense get in your way, and be open and let the information sit. Take it home with you, chew on it, eat the fish, spit out the bones, whatever you want to do with it. But he has studied and researched, and his heart is right, and I want him to just pour out his heart to you guys. So, I'll shut up and get out of the way. All the way from Modain, Israel, the home of the Maccabees, Hanoch Young.
Every morning. I wear the masks to try to keep myself from getting sick. I get sick routinely when I travel in America. No offense, y'all. Just, 6.5 weeks on the road, different beds, different, flights and things. I'm not going to talk about issues like vaccinations because, y'all lose your minds about that. Don't worry. I'm not here to talk about that. When I mentioned to people that I was coming back to America and my primary talk that I'll be delivering is actually the one that you'll hear at 2 o'clock. This is just for, I would say all y'all, because I am in Louisiana. But there are people listening from all over, so all of yous. Having grown up in the Bronx, as you know, I'm not a native English speaker. We spoke something similar to English. You hear me? So hopefully we'll smooth out the accents and everything will be fine. I did make a few notes on index cards, which is incredibly unusual. I never speak from index cards. But I'm not as familiar with the Christian scriptures to note, although this is not going to be a lot of chapter and verse. This is going to be a lot of things, as Pastor Joe said, to think about, to chew on. But I did mention to a couple of people that I was coming to America, and I was really looking forward to discussing the Jewishness of Yeshua. That's pretty much the reaction I got. Why on earth would you touch a subject? Okay, maybe key, maybe central, but why go there? You've got nothing to gain and everything to lose. And what they were probably referring to is the fact that I've been coming to America routinely since August 2013. This is my 23rd trip. Of course, there was that hiatus of the last 2 years. That was BT, the before times. Now we've got a whole new world, and it's just lovely. Some of you know that I had to move up my date, spend a fortune to change my tickets because Israel was declaring the U.S. a red country. No, that's not the red and blue that you've got going at election time. Oh, another topic we shouldn't talk about. No, so make a long story short, here I am. Why is this such a big issue? Because I'm known for the phrase mutual respect. Mutual respect for the reconciliation, restoration of all of Israel. That is probably the hardest thing for people to grasp. Because their concept of mutual respect is that I agree and respect them, and they can diss me all they want. And I just don't understand that. First of all, mutual respect has nothing to do with agreement. Absolutely nothing. So what does this all have to do with Yeshua? One of the things that's become clear to me after all these years and all these speeches and all these visits to all over, I've spoken in 29 states, Germany, Sri Lanka. I mean, it just, in case any of you are wondering, I've yet to be invited to Canada. Subtle hint. But that's okay. That's okay. Priscilla Reed is sitting there up there in British Columbia right now, shifting around. Y'all calm down. Calm down. It's the lack of this movement, Hebrew roots, Messianic, their unwillingness to grasp the full Jewishness of Yeshua that leads them to be anti-Semitic. And that was a big revelation. I've had a lot of time to think in the last 2 years. I'm a tour guide. When your country bars tourists from coming in, what do? You sit and think, I don't have the kind of personality that does well in isolation. Not at all. But it did give me time to think and study. And when there are congregations that have had me, and they know who I am. You can go back on YouTube and check any of my speeches. You'll find the same patterns, the same willingness to accept people that I believe to be my brothers and sisters, unconditionally. Allowing Hashem to make us all one in His time. But for some people, the issue of letting God be God is just not acceptable. Since God has created us in His image, so many people today have decided to return the favor. And they're going to recreate God as they see Him. So when I find that there are congregations that have had me, and then basically come back and tell me, well, the elders decided they didn't want a Jew coming again. That's what they told me. Now, I did get in trouble, actually 2 years ago, almost exactly to the day I was here. No, actually, I was there. The old building, opposite the big jail. The Beauregard Parish Prison, or whatever it was. I loved it. I love Louisiana, I have to tell you. Really, when you're driving over the contraband bayou, this is so much better than growing up in the Bronx. All right, the reason I brought the cards is to get me back to focus, because I could tell stories all night. And it isn't even the night yet. When I say that Yeshua lived his entire life as a Jew, everyone agrees. Oh, you guys agree. Although there are some people in the rest of the Christian world that don't see it that way. Famous 2 women tourists from America were in the Shorashim shop in Jerusalem. And one was saying to the other, evidently they had just come from a session with their tour guide. Did you hear what he said? That Jesus was a Jew? Heaven forbid. Not only was Jesus a Jew, but he was far more Jewish than most people are willing to realize. But we're gonna get to that. Part of that is to explain the cultural milieu, the environment that Yeshua lived in. I'm a tour guide. This is what I do. The caveat of I'm not a rabbi, I'm not a theologian. I have no interest in discussing topics that bore me. Sorry. So, what is Tchiyat HaMetim, the resurrection of the dead? I studied it once for about 3 minutes. By minute 4, I was getting bored. I've let my daughters know that after my time on this earth is over, they can take my remains, put it in a Nike box, and leave it on the E-train in Manhattan. Why? Because if I'm one of the righteous that will be resurrected, Hashem's going to figure it out. I'm not going to come back and, the skeleton rattling. Come on. Clarification. What I will be speaking about today is Yeshua in his lifetime. Historical. I will not be dealing with any element relating to Yeshua after his death, your beliefs of resurrection, where Yeshua fits it. I will be illustrating how we Jews and Christians see things differently. So some of you are wondering in advance, okay, cut to the chase. Which one of us is right? Actually, here's the best part. We're both right. We're both right because it's how we see it. We're not talking about that. We're going to talk about Yeshua in his lifetime. Okay. I have struggled with trying to explain to people my Jewish observance. I'm not comfortable with the term Orthodox, but that's the term that people understand the most. I said traditionally observant, people are like, huh? So we forget that. But I'm going to give you a little test right now. I'm going to read you something that has been posted on Facebook, actually by a number of friends of mine. And this statement got tremendous response. And normally I ask people to be relatively quiet while I talk. But now I want, as soon as I finish reading this little card, I want you to immediately shout out like, yeah, right on, no, okay, and a reaction. This is so unusual for me. And now we're getting to audience participation. This is like, okay, and this was the meme on Facebook. Many turn from Jesus because of a bad experience with religious people. We must remind them that Jesus also had a bad experience with religious people. He was crucified by them. Reaction. Since when do we consider the Romans religious people? Oh, wait a minute. It's because y'all blame the Jews. Okay. The Jews. Okay. There's a tendency now in the Hebrew Roots movement, and again, when I refer to the Hebrew Roots movement, as I have almost exclusively in the last year and a half, as a Christian denomination, many of my friends are very uncomfortable with that term. They don't think of themselves as Christian. Although I can go down the list of what do Christians believe, and they check all the boxes. They want to add in the Torah piece somewhere. But you also have to remember who's held on to the Torah since the northern kingdom of Israel was exiled in 722 before the Common Era. So for the last 2,700 years, the embodiment of the Torah, how we have Torah to this day, is our side of the family. Okay, but let's keep going. Christians yearn to be in heaven. Jews yearn to bring heaven to earth. Just a different way. What we're going to look at is different ways of seeing that. Pastor Joe told me that people have been asking, Hanoch has come, many times over the years, but what do Jews really believe? We're going to go through some of those things. Someone posted the other day on Facebook. I spend way too much time on Facebook. I admit to you. I should go to a 12-step program for Facebook. I admit that I'm powerless, Yeah, it's bad. I need to get a life. Okay. Question was, would Yeshua, coming back today, be more at home in a church or a synagogue? If you even have to pause for a second, you're missing the essence of Yeshua's life. Because, okay, how many people here grew up as a Baptist? Praise God. Don't be shy. Don't worry, this is not a Baptist recovery meeting. Not at all. But the Yeshua that you've been struggling to understand and incorporate in a life of Torah is not the Jesus that you were taught and raised on. The very fact that it's always described as Jesus, Yeshua, versus the Pharisees, or better yet, the Jews. Okay, let me tell you something. I recently took an online course. It was a specialization in Christianity and Christianity in the Holy Land, because Christianity in Israel is totally different than anywhere else in the world, certainly different than here in North America. And I'll explain why in a moment. But it was great. It was 4 weeks, 6 hours a night. And the person teaching the Christian scriptures, I struggle with the term New Testament, and I'll explain that a little later. I think Pastor Joe and I are doing a session in the afternoon where we speak a little bit about understanding the Bible and how we view it differently. We read the same thing and view it differently because we have an underlying preconception of what it is. So the person teaching Christian scriptures, Father Dr. David Newhouse, he is the head of all the Jesuits in Israel. And he was pointing out certain things, like for instance, that in the book of Mark, it mentions Jews, the Jews, 2 times. 2 times. But whoever the author of the book of John was, now I know for those of you who are fundamentalist Protestants, the idea that the New Testament scriptures were written later and by other people, because they are anonymous. They are anonymous. They're also written at a time where polemics were very important. Now understand something. The 4 gospel accounts are written about Yeshua and his life as a Jew in the land of Israel amongst other Jews. This is an internal family discussion. So how is it possible that in the book of John, 70 times the Jews are mentioned? The Jews. When y'all sit around talking about Cajuns, you never say the Cajuns. You're talking about your peeps. You never refer to them that way, unless there's a reason that it... Now, the book of Acts also uses the term the Jews about 70 times. But they're describing Jews in different locations. It makes sense. When you're talking about the people of Antioch, well, you're talking about the Jews of Antioch. All right. Yeshuas Judaism. Let's understand this. We're told clearly that his parents were observant Jews. It's the book of Luke. Later, by the way, I can give you all the, the chapters and verses and all those things. And I actually am now inspired to write something up about all of this, which is basically an incredible no-win situation for me. I mean, who am I writing to? Really. But already, digressing for a second, so 2 years ago, I got in trouble. The presentation that I gave here at Out of Ashes was left online, my bad, and I was traveling shortly afterwards to Oregon and Washington. That's America's West Bank. Right. Oh, I'm sorry. Is that term not politically correct? Oh, you got it. Okay, yeah. Get better laughs than talking about election results, don't we? Yeah, okay, so we'll stay away from that. People watched it and then refused to come to hear me speak. And again, I depend upon making a personal connection with people. So what was it that they got so offended by? When I mentioned a particular congregation by name and a particular pastor by name, and I mentioned how I'm not welcome to come back there because I'm a Jew. They told me that. So I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm not going to mention the congregation, and I'm not going to mention the pastor by name. the fact that the congregation is in Monroe, Louisiana. We don't have, there's no reason to say that. There's no reason to point fingers. As you see, I'm a little disabled. Okay, Yeshua's Judaism. We're told that Yeshua had his Brit Milah, his circumcision, on the 8th day. You'd be amazed at how many American Jewish boys no longer have that or are circumcised in the hospital by the physician. It's really amazing. We're told that Yeshua observed the Chagim, the holidays, the feasts, in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem. In other words, he made the Aliyah HaRegel. He weighed the pilgrimage. And he was so religious, he not only went for the feast days, he went for Hanukkah. Book of John, they didn't edit that one out. It passes the vision of most people because it refers to the Feast of Dedication. If you don't speak Hebrew, and by the way, if you feel drawn to the Torah, and obviously you do because you're here, you should learn some Hebrew. C'est bon? When in Rome, by the way, when in Rome, what a great expression. There's a tendency to study the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, and the Christian scriptures in particular, in what's called the A-N-E. What's that mean? Ancient Near East. And it's a great idea to study the culture. What was going on in Corinth when Paul was writing his letter? Makes perfect sense. So please explain to me where the pastors are that are teaching the Jewish context of the land of Israel 2,000 years ago. They ain't. Now understand something. To me, Yeshua was one of us. No offense. Y'all can take him. That's fine. But remember, he is rooted as a Jew, using a modern term backwards, an Orthodox Jew, and I'll explain why in a few moments, in the land of Israel, an Israeli like me. Not only that, he was what your government would call a settler. He was born in Bethlehem. That's under the control of the Palestinian Authority. That city is Judenrein, Jew-free. They wouldn't have let him in. Wow, how the story would have changed. But that couldn't have possibly happened because Palestinians weren't invented till 1964. That would have been really, really awkward. Matthew, the author of the book of Matthew, makes it very clear. Quotes Yeshua saying, "Do not think that I have come." You know this. But then why do people leave congregations thinking, well, he changed that? But he didn't. The basic misunderstanding of Yeshua's Judaism has to do with the oral law. And because 10 out of 9 people in these type of congregations have had no experience whatsoever in rabbinic dialogue and the oral law, and the fact that the Christian scriptures are written in such a way that it's Yeshua versus fill in the blanks, the Jews, Pharisees, Sadducees, everyone. He's totally different. Let me tell you something which is really startling. As a Jew, as an Orthodox Jew, there is nothing that Yeshua ever taught that wasn't acceptable and within the context of rabbinic discourse and understanding. Nothing. Fully acceptable to me. What's the problem? The problem is when you want to create Yeshua, again, in his lifetime, if you want to create that he was so different than anyone else, all the Jews were inferior and unintelligent and wrong. Now, there's nothing that I'm sharing with you today that should challenge or make your faith in Yeshua uncomfortable or different or difficult at all. Nothing. Nothing that I'm saying or teaching. But still people will feel that way. I didn't realize when I began reaching out to people that I believe to be my brothers and sisters, I never realized that I was engaging, I never thought of it this way, that I was engaging in interfaith dialogue. Do you know the way interfaith dialogue usually works? You get a bunch of, it's kind of like a rabbi, a priest, and a minister go walking into, hog heaven but you get some rabbi somewhere and usually the pastor is hosting and he says something along the lines of, we believe the Messiah is returning for the second time. Rabbi Schwartz and stuff, he believes the Messiah is coming for the first time. So do you know what? Why don't we agree that when the Messiah comes, we'll ask him, did you come before or is this the first time? And everyone laughs and they're all totally wrong. They're totally wrong because how we define the Messiah, we the Jewish people, is totally, come on now. How is it that I got hurt? Yeah. Than Christians do. Let me explain the Jewish understanding of the Messiah. And again, this is not a question of who's right, who's wrong. We see it differently. So when we have a conversation, we're talking about two different things. So when Christians come, and I get witnessed to all the time. All the time. And people have actually said to me, I think I've shared this here in the past, like, Hanoch, you're really funny. You're a nice guy. I'm going to miss you when I'm in heaven. Well, excuse me. Okay, Jewish understanding of Mashiach, Messiah. First of all, the term Mashiach just means anointed. All the kings of Israel were anointed. But the Jewish understanding is a human being, that's a key point for us, a human being, a man, a descendant of David, of King David, verifiably, and actually they have tests now that could prove that. I'm a mutt, so I have no idea, who to trace my lineage back to. Becomes ruler of Israel, king of Israel. He ingathers the exiles, rebuilds the temple unless it's already rebuilt. There is no more war. There is peace on earth. Literally, the lion, the lamb, the wolf, everyone's, no wars, no sex slavery, none of that stuff. When he dies, and as a human being he will, his son inherits the throne. This is the Davidic monarchy. When Christianity uses the term Messiah, they mean Son of God, Lord and Savior, someone who had to die. Their blood atonement was necessary for the forgiveness of sins, otherwise y'all will rot in hell forever. We don't have a concept of hell. We don't have a devil, with a pitchfork and the sulfur burning and all that. We don't have that. It's not a question of who's right or wrong. Heck, maybe there's a way we're both wrong. It doesn't matter. But when people say, why don't you accept Messiah? We don't want to see prophecies that say he'll do this, that, or the other thing. Where's the beef? From our perspective, this is not disrespectful at all to Christianity. We see it differently. And we talk at each other rather than to each other. Yeshua called strictly for Torah observance. It's so, again, when you read the Christian scriptures as a Jew, strictly with a Jewish lens, it's staggering. It's staggering to wonder how it is for almost 2,000 years. People have been walking into walls, so confused. They're like a bunch of dazed cockroaches. I don't know. You guys don't have cockroaches here? In New York, we were not bigger than New York. Well, my cockroach is bigger than yours. Okay, no. We know Yeshua said the Shema. The love of Torah. It's interesting. The book of John, before it goes into all the Jews, it's interesting how when we read things, we put our own voices in it. It's kind of like, what does Yeshua say? I go around to groups and I hear so often, if only we were able to love Yeshua more. And what's great is, Pastor Joe and I have had this conversation many times. Part of the problem is that y'all grow up singing songs like Amazing Grace. A wretch like you. We don't have a concept of original sin. We don't think we're wretches. In fact, maybe in some cases our mothers have told us we're God's gift. Maybe one stereotype is actually true. But what does Yeshua say? Does Yeshua say, y'all gotta love me more? Im ata ohev oti tishmor et mitzvotai. I said it in the language that Yeshua spoke. Hebrew and Aramaic. Yeshua never spoke Greek, by the way. I'll prove that to you in a second if you remind me, because I'll go off on a tangent. That means, if you love me, you will observe my commandments. Now, some people use that as a proof that Yeshua is divine, God. My commandments. That's where you don't understand the cultural milieu. It's very common in the Jewish world to say, oh, Hanoch, you've got to hear Rabbi Shmuli's Torah. It was unbelievable, earth-shattering. No, Rabbi Shmuli, that's not his, but it was his exposition, his explanation of a part of the Torah. Again, doesn't challenge anything about your beliefs, but it's just separating it out. Okay, what about I love this in English, it's called the antithesis statements, where Yeshua said, you may have heard, but I'm going to tell you, and in each and every case, isn't it like way more strict? Okay, wait a second. But did that mean Yeshua was adding to the Torah? Because we don't do that. No. He was doing a very common practice of the Pharisees, of building a fence around the Torah. That in order to keep this particular mitzvah, we're gonna put some barriers in the way. Very acceptable. This is what we did and what we do. Part of the misunderstanding is that people now look back at the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, a document that relates stories and the situations, doesn't pretend to be a history book, by the way. No one in the Jewish community, this is not exact history. If you remind me of the part about the Yeshua speaking Greek, something a priest told me. I hang with priests. Not Judas Priest. Got another thing coming. I am just a bad boy. So bad. And I distracted myself. The antithesis statements. Okay, the Iron Age document. People assume, I've actually had people get off the plane in Israel, people I've guided, Christians, mainstream Christians, not Hebrew roots Christians, who've said to me, I thought that at Ben Gurion Airport, they would give me a toga, a walking staff, and a pair of sandals. They think they're walking right back into the pages of the Bible. I have heard Pastor Joe teach repeatedly on the period of 400 years between the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, and the Christian scriptures. That's the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's all kind. In other words, that's the world. If you want to know where Yeshua got his verbiage from, that's the world he got it from. He didn't get it all the way from the Tanakh. He got it from current speech. We all use current speech. If those of you who are as old as I am and grew up watching the Flintstone cartoons, Yabba Dabba Doo Time will have a gay old time. You don't use that expression the same way any longer. Not that there's anything wrong with it. That's an example. Okay, so think, for Americans, let me illustrate it for you this way. I don't understand why you Americans have so many laws in each of your states. Wait a second, you got a Constitution, you got a Bill of Rights. What do you need anything for? The problem is the world changes a bit. The world changes. Halakha, Jewish law, has to adjust. The oral law for us, was a way to take the concepts that we have to observe and adjust them for modern realities. The world has changed. You don't want to believe it? Don't. Go back and live in a cave. No, you don't have caves here. My friends listening in Franklin, North Carolina, they have caves up there. Yeah. Hollers are in Kentucky. Yeah. My friends in Kentucky, this is a picture of the holler I grew up in. Holler back, girl. I don't know what that means. Okay. Yeshua wore tzitzit. Whether he wore them inside his 511 tack pants or not, like I do, I don't know. But he wore it from the four corners of his garment. Of course he did. And that woman didn't grab the hem of his garment. Come on now. Okay? Yeshua put on tefillin. Matthew 23:5. Yeah, put on tefillin. All Jewish men did. Still do, weekdays. He encouraged the korbanot. He was for the korbanot, the service in the Beit HaMikdash in the temple. After his death, his brother Yaakov. Now, Yaakov translates to Jacob. Do any of you know why Yeshua's brother Yaakov wound up with the name in English, James? What translation is most familiar in the world? That's right. Bing, 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 bing. Give Pastor Joe a gold star. He's been studying. Kyle must have been tutoring him. Okay, that's great. Okay. Despite the Protestant world, Yeshua was never sola scriptura. Now, the disagreements that are recounted, again, the internal rabbinic discussion that is recounted within the New Testament scriptures, all are issues relating to the oral law. There's not one written mitzvah that Yeshua is quoted as debating with anyone. Now, if there was no oral law that he observed, why wouldn't he simply have just blown it out of the water saying, y'all are making this stuff up? He was discussing it because he saw it happening differently. Rabbis always do that. The Mishnah, the oral law, we've got hundreds of rabbis. And let me tell you something. I saw this in a book once, and I think it's absolutely true. The Mishnah, our oral law, will often quote something along the lines of Omar Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says, and then it would quote him. Had Christianity not developed, we would today in the Mishnah have things that would say, Omer Rabbi Yeshua. He lost his place as a sage because of what Christianity turned him into. So when I say I'm here, and I'm not the only one, by the way, doing this, to reclaim Yeshua as part of the Jewish people, that's something, instead of frightening people or have your heads blow up about it. Did anyone see the Kingsman movie? All these guys were having their heads blown up. Anyway, not worth seeing. I have way too much time on my hands. It's terrible. I see this as another path towards reconciliation. Astoundingly. Now, I bounce this off a bunch of people, and they really think... The problem that most people have with me is never having gotten high and never having gotten drunk. First of all, that's problematic in and of itself. Feel for me. It's a little late in life, when you're, midway through your 7th decade to start saying like, hey, let's get a bottle of, particularly the stuff that they sell in the stores here. That stuff cleans, okay. Other things that I just picked out, like things about, okay, so Yeshua and the oral law, another proof. The whole saga of Yochanan HaMatbil, John the Immerser, or John the Baptizer. No offense to anyone, he was never a Baptist. Okay, and every once in a while you'll see a meme that would say, John was never a Baptist, Mary was never a Catholic, et cetera, et cetera. But this is that whole story. Where in the Torah does it ever speak about baptism? In the Torah. It's not mentioned. Mikvah is not mentioned. But it was part of our oral tradition. So it made perfect sense for Yochanan and his cousin. What a great family, huh? Yeah. But again, if you don't know the Jewish context of it, you skip right over it and it doesn't hit you. Be careful what you hit. This is blessings before eating. We do to this day, my side of the family. Well, so did Yeshua. And I jotted down the Matthew and Mark in 8:7, Mark 4:27. It's exactly the same thing in Masechet Brachot, in the tractate of Brachot, of blessings, that we have today in the Talmud. It tells you the same thing. This is how it is that Yeshua was turned into this Roman pagan Jesus I've read church history, so I understand what happened. The fact that today people in what they call the Hebrew roots movement don't understand this astounds me. That's the part mainstream Christians, I don't expect them to know any of this stuff. They believe that, pork and crawfish and shrimp and all that good stuff is all cool. So they're not going to understand this. But people who claim to be Torah, like my favorite expression, I'm walking in Torah. Come on now, that's bad. This at first I didn't catch this. In Matthew 9:15, it mentions about fasting in the presence of a bridegroom, a chatan. And of course, there's no commentary on that. But we do that. To this day, we still do that. Okay. Matthew 26:20, talking about the Pesach meal, mentions in English, Yeshua reclined. Why would it mention that? Because in the Seder on Pesach, It tells us we recline. This is what Jews do. This is how we roll. We're an exciting people, aren't we? Okay, then it mentions Yeshua. Okay, this is Matthew 26:27. Yeshua took the cup of wine. What do you mean, the cup? Wouldn't it be a cup? No, he took the cup because part of the seder, part of the ritual, is the cup of wine. Of course he did. Nice Jewish boy. After the Pesach meal, according to Mark 14:26, they sung a hymn. Amazing grace. No, Hallel. Yeah. Okay. So what is it that if the people in the Hebrew roots movement aren't studying the Jewish background of Yeshua, what are they studying? Well, they're studying that the earth is flat. I tried to tell the pilot on Southwest the other day. Told me to get my seat or I'd be tased. So I sat down. So the earth is flat. How do you pronounce the name? Do you know how many friends have asked me, Hanoch, you actually speak Hebrew. I know you don't say the name, but if you would, how would you say it? We don't, because I think it's a diss. But do you know what's funny? The sacred name is such an issue in so many Hebrew roots congregations. Could someone please, I must have missed this, can someone please show me in the gospel accounts where the sacred name is mentioned? Where Paul, in one of the letters, many letters, where he mentions this is the same. If it's that important, how is it that the entire Christian scriptures don't address it a single time? But remember, fear not, because there's someone sitting right now in, I don't know, Pocatello, Idaho, figuring this all out. They are getting the input from the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, and they're going to straighten us all out. Just say no to drugs. Yeshua repeatedly taught priorities. His focus was personal ethics. He never said, when he said, oh, you guys are busy tithing mint and this, but you're not doing, he never said you shouldn't be doing that at all. It's the issue of weightier matters. There are more important things to do. Are you really going to worry that much of how many bumps there are on your etrog, your citron, when y'all go Sukkotin? You know, what about the widows and orphans in your community that are going hungry? So they're all within the framework of what we should be doing, but still, priorities. These are. The other problem is when I used to use cue cards, first of all, they were bigger. And for some reason, I was able to hold them closer than I am now. One of the difficulties in understanding Yeshua from a Jewish perspective is the fact that, and this came out in many conversations with Pastor Joe, for Christians in America, you were raised to understand that your Christianity and your American patriotism were one and the same. Okay, so first of all, that explains a lot of reactions to former President Trump. To this day, whatever happened with the election numbers, but all of those people thought that on March 4th he was going to take over again and how many pleas did I see on Facebook asking for God to save his people? The Mormons believe that the New Jerusalem is going to be in Missouri. By the way, it's Missouri, I think, but Missouri, or Salt Lake City. It's going to be in my hood. Okay? Many people have not yet been to Israel. I, with all my heart, plead with you to make it happen. Now, the problem is, right now, today, you could win the Publishers Clearinghouse. Ed McMahon can come back from wherever Ed McMahon is and give you the big check, but we still can't accept tourists. By the way, I don't know if you know this, but as of November, tourists cannot enter the United States of America unless they're vaccinated. I don't know if you realize that. I mean, you're not tourists, but so this is the world right now is in a state of upheaval. Did anyone ever see the movie A Bronx Tale? No? Okay, well, thank you. Okay. There's a great scene. It's about gangsters, mobsters in the Bronx. And at one point, this motorcycle gang comes into a bar. And they're supposed to behave, but they don't. So Sonny, the head mobster, goes, it's a great scene, because he asked them to leave, and they said all these potty words to him, bad words, which no, I'm not going to tell him. The kids are in the back going, yeah, what's he going to say? No, I'm not going to tell you. So Sonny goes and he whispers something to the kid who goes around. He's getting the other guys to come in. But in the meantime, he goes and he locks the door to the bar from the inside. So they turn around, they look at him, and he looks at them and says, now yous can't leave. And I just love that. It's like, now yous can't leave. The sad part is, now yous can't come. For now. For now. But I would strongly recommend, and I'll be speaking about that more in the next session about Israel. But if you can't relate to Israel, and sadly, I'm the only Jew that you know, there are normal ones of us. There really are. I would really, you've got to come to Israel. You will never study Scripture again the same way. Now, one quick thing about the Pharisees. Saying that, first of all, there were only a few thousand Pharisees at that time. 2 to 3 million Jews in the land of Israel under Roman military occupation. The Pharisees. The Talmud describes 7 types of Pharisees. So when you say the Pharisees, who are you talking about? Saying the Pharisees is as wrong as saying the Republicans. What do I mean? Wait a second. Donald Trump Republican? Nikki Haley Republican? Mitt Romney Republican? Ooh. What about, what's her name in California? Marjorie Taylor Greene. The one, that talk about the Jew space lasers that were setting the forest fires in California? She's a Republican. So what Republican? So there's no the Pharisees. The other thing, let me tell you something about the Pharisees. Pharisees were only in the land of Israel. You could not be a Pharisee in Babylonia, in Alexandria, in Antioch, or even in Tarsus. You can't claim to be a Pharisee outside of the land of Israel. The term rabbi, which Yeshua was called, term only used by Pharisees. The concept of resurrection of the dead. You believe Yeshua to be resurrected. Only the Pharisees believe that. Sadducees were totally against that. The Sadducees, by the way, were the group that were closest with the Romans. They were collaborators. And by the way, they are the ones that ran the Beit HaMikdash, the temple. So when you say the Pharisees put Yeshua on trial, Impossible. Impossible. They weren't in charge. Caiaphas, Sadducee, not a Pharisee. I could go on and on. References to Messiah, only the Pharisees. Okay. I think we're almost out of time, but I want to pause for a second. I know we have an official questions and answers, or questions and responses, or, by the way, for those of you who've been to Israel, not with me as your tour guide, but other tour guides, sometimes tour guides are famous for making stuff up. So it's kind of like, you need an answer? Hey, I give you the answer. Now, how do you know if you're getting the real deal or not? When someone says to you, you know the story of Jacob sleeping on the rock? Yeah. This is the rock. That's when you know that someone is fertilizing their lawn. Pastor Joe quoted something earlier about holding the tzitzit of 10. Now, I wear my tzitzit in my pants.
We're not going now.
Now, it's kind of funny when other people finish your lines. No, that's not what I was going to say. But Nati Rome, who's a wonderful guy, Nati Rome has a program called Lev HaOlam, where you can buy a monthly box of things produced by small family businesses in Judea and Samaria, the heart of biblical Israel. When we were at Nati's home with our Connect to Israel tour, the one that Mike Clayton and I run, someone brought this up, and Nati said something that I'll never forget. He said, yes, the prophecy says that, but when you're grabbing onto the tzitzit of the Jew, make sure you got the right one. Okay, so mine are hidden. I'm not the right one. But please, if there's something that I said that you found offensive, normally I would say, good on you. But this is really, probably in my mind, one of the most important things that I've shared over all these years. Yeshua should be the unifying factor among us, rather than just something else keeping us apart. We can very readily agree upon Yeshua in his lifetime and his teachings without having to buy into what you believe happened post-death. And again, I fully respect that. And again, respect. Okay, one quick thing. Let me end on a meme that I posted recently that caused people to go nuts. Gene Wilder played a character in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Was it Willy Wonka? Whatever. He's kind of like there smirking. And it said, tell me again how you're going to be one with Brother Judah when you're busy dissing his traditions. Diss is the colloquialism for disrespecting. Right. That's all it said. It didn't say accept our traditions. It didn't say believe what we do. People went nuts. I mean, I cut it off at about 135 comments, including a pastor of a congregation that I'm going to be speaking at next month. And I wrote to him. First of all, he's never commented on anything at all on Facebook. All of a sudden, he said, oh, and the washing of the hands, do you use this middle cup or this plate? Like, I didn't ask you. I didn't suggest. It doesn't say anything. But if you walk around, there's plenty of Christianity. Well, you guys make fun of Christianity enough. You don't need me to do it. What is the point of doing that? What is the point of disrespecting, of making fun of someone's beliefs? We should look for what unites us. I have to tell you, I grew up at the end of the Vietnam War. America was totally totally divided. It seemed the country was on the verge of I don't know what. Absolutely nothing compared to now. This is an America which is so filled with hate. I don't know. I don't know how America is going to step back from the edge. Honestly. I mean, I fear in my heart. Whoever the president is next time around, maybe whoever it is will be able to stay awake. I don't know. It was a big thing in Israel when Biden was meeting with Naftali Bennett, our prime minister, and he's sitting there like this. So, of course, people, put in like a soundtrack thing of, like, didn't happen. And then, of course, again, I don't want to get into American stuff, but January 6th, I'm watching the news here, and the vice president compares that to Pearl Harbor or 9/11. So people are just so distant from reality, where we have a chance to sit. There is nothing about Yeshua in his lifetime that he ever taught that could keep us apart. Nothing. Anything that you think might be, you're making it up in your head.